Hi, I'm Jessie. I'm an integrative doctor of physical therapy at the Healing Collective in Niwot, Colorado, and this is a variation of Bhaktasana, the devotional pose in yoga, that can really help enhance and amplify your flexion overhead reach with the shoulders. It can help to stretch the lats and really just give you some more mobility in the shoulders. You can do this posture on the floor. I'm going to use my high-low table just because it's what I have available. And you'll start on hands and knees with your palms underneath your shoulders, your knees underneath the hips. So this is like your general starting position. Then you'll widen the knees apart, untuck the toes so the feet are flat on the floor or the table. Bring the toes to touch, and then sink your hips back towards your heels, keeping the hands where they were. From here, you can gaze forward and walk your hands forward as far as you can without lifting the hips off the table, right? So your hips are low and your arms are walking forward just to get as much length as you can in the upper body. Allow your head to rest on the table or the floor. And if it doesn't reach, you can always utilize a block or a folded blanket under your forehead. From here, rotate from the shoulders so that the thumbs point up at the ceiling. This is an external rotation of the humerus bone in the shoulder. Bring the palms together, bend the elbows, and you might not, I have very open shoulders, you might not look quite like this does. Come up as high as you can without any discomfort, maybe just a little edge of a stretch, and then walk the elbows forward and in toward your head, and sink your hips even further, and enjoy some nice, slow, deep, relaxing breathing here. In through your nose. You can imagine the breath pooling under the shoulder blades or into any area that you feel tension or restriction. Exhale, imagine any of that tension just oozing out through your forehead into the floor or the block or the blanket. And stay here for at least 5 to 10 very long, slow, deep breaths, encouraging your nervous system to relax and settle into this nice opening for the shoulders. When it's time to come out, slowly return your hands to the floor. Inhale, gaze up, and come to hands and knees. Step your knees underneath your hips, and then you can transition back to seated or standing. So here are some modifications for this position. If you come to hands and knees, and you widen your knees apart, big toes touch, sink back into the position. If you feel like you get stuck at some point, right? Like you can't fully sit your hips back and down onto your heels, ask your body, where am I feeling this stuckness? And it'll either be in the hips, in the knees, or at the ankles. So if the stuck spot is at the ankles, it usually means that the ankles, the toes, can't be totally flat on the table. There's a restriction there. And what you would do is, if you were on a table of some sort, you would let your feet hang off of the edge of the table and then be able to come all the way back into the posture. If you don't have this kind of a setup, you can roll a towel or a yoga blanket like I have here. It really doesn't have to be anything fancy, and it doesn't have to be a humongous roll. It just depends on how much mobility you have or lack in the ankles. So you can place the rolled towel under the ankles and see if that allows you to sit all the way back and down into the pose. If the limitation when you're testing feels like it's more coming from the knees, and that could be like pain in the knees or just the knees don't bend any further than that, you would take the same blanket setup in a relatively flat orientation of the blanket, take it behind the knees, and really pull the blanket up in the knee creases. And you can be pulling forward as you sink your hips back. And what this does is it gives a little bit of support, a little bit of space between the knees, and then you can come forward into the posture from there. And then finally, if the restriction feels like it's coming from the hips, and it might feel like hip pain or hip discomfort or impingement, then you would bring the blanket in its flat open fold all the way into the hip creases, sink the hips back and down, and then reach the arms forward to enjoy the posture. So those are some modifications for in case getting into the classical child's pose, devotional pose is less accessible for your body. These can really help to make this a pose that's more comfortable, that you can actually be able to enjoy as you're working on the arm variations. Hope this is helpful. Be well.